Ever since Alex and Mara moved into their new apartment, strange lights began appearing in the corners of their rooms. At first, they thought it was just a flickering street lamp outside, but soon, the light started moving on its own, twisting, stretching, and forming shapes that shouldn't exist. And when the shadows began reaching for them, Alex realized one terrifying truth. The light wasn't just watching, it wanted them. It started with the light. Not just any light, but a pale, flickering glow that appeared in the corners of my apartment at night, crawling along the walls like it had a life of its own. At first I told myself it was a reflection from the street lamp outside, or maybe my eyes playing tricks after a long day. But soon, I noticed it didn't behave like any ordinary light. It twisted and stretched in impossible angles, casting shadows that didn't match the furniture or walls. Sometimes, it seemed almost human in shape, thin and elongated, as if the glow itself had decided to imitate a person. I tried ignoring it. I told myself it was stress, exhaustion, the mind's way of creating patterns in the dark. But each night, the glow returned. Stronger, bolder. The first night, I saw it flicker along the baseboards and vanish when I blinked. The second night, it lingered in the corner of my bedroom, forming shapes that shifted as if breathing. I froze, convinced I saw a shadowy figure crouching in the corner, thin and pale, almost translucent, blending perfectly with the glow. My heart raced, but when I turned on the lights, nothing was there. Just the ordinary shadows of the furniture, untouched and inert. Sleep became difficult. I started staying awake long after midnight, watching the glow from my bed, afraid to close my eyes. Every time I looked away, it moved closer, inch by inch, almost teasing me. It didn't make a sound, but its presence was suffocating. The air in the apartment felt heavier, like it had weight, pressing against my chest. I noticed that my belongings were subtly shifting when I wasn't looking. A chair slightly moved. A book turned upside down, but I couldn't tell if it was the glow or my own paranoia. One night, curiosity overcame fear. I followed it. I crept from my bedroom, my bare feet cold against the floor, and the glow led me down the hallway to the kitchen. I held my breath, expecting something impossible to happen. When I flipped on the lights, the room was empty, eerily normal. The refrigerator hummed faintly, louder than usual, but still nothing was out of place. And yet, when I opened the fridge, I felt a sense of darkness far deeper than the inside of a cold appliance should have. It was almost tangible, like staring into a void. I slammed it shut, my hand shaking, and the feeling lingered. The next morning I inspected my apartment more closely. That's when I noticed it. Marks on the walls, long and thin, etched deep into the paint, forming jagged lines that I hadn't seen before. They were chaotic, yet deliberate, as if someone or something had carved them intentionally. My stomach twisted as I squinted, trying to make sense of them. Slowly my mind registered letters forming in the scratches. One word. Simple, terrifying. See, my pulse spiked and I stepped back. I didn't remember making these marks. No one had been in the apartment. I tried rationalizing. Maybe a small rodent had scratched the walls, or maybe it was water damage peeling the paint in a strange pattern. But the letters were too precise, too deliberate, and the edges seemed to glow faintly, like they were catching the light in a way no ordinary scratch could. I touched one of the lines with my fingertip. A shiver ran through me as the surface felt warm, as if the wall itself were alive. I jerked my hand back. My apartment had become a cage, and the glow, whatever it was both the lock and the key. That night, the glow returned. Brighter, bolder, crawling along the walls and ceiling in ways that made no sense. I huddled under my blanket, trying not to look, trying to pretend it wasn't real, but my eyes kept darting to the corner, where the shadows seemed to twist unnaturally. Then I noticed a shape forming within the glow, tall, thin, with arms that stretched too far, moving fluidly, like liquid light. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The figure raised one elongated hand slowly, deliberately, pointing at me. My chest tightened, and then it vanished, just like that. No flicker, no shimmer, just empty darkness. Yet the mark remained on the wall. Another message etched deep and fresh. See me. My breath caught in my throat. The fear wasn't just in my mind, it was real, and somehow, it knew I was watching. The morning after the scratches appeared, I couldn't convince myself that it had all been in my head. The marks were still there, darker now, as if they had absorbed some kind of energy from the night. I traced them lightly with my fingertips, half expecting the glow to flicker back, but nothing happened. The apartment was silent, almost deceptively calm. I wondered if leaving for work would make a difference, if stepping into sunlight could somehow dilute whatever had marked me. But even as I walked out the door, I felt the heaviness clinging to my chest, the prickling sensation at the back of my neck, like being watched by something invisible. At work I tried to focus, to bury myself in routine, but my mind kept wandering. Every time I closed my eyes, the corners of my apartment flashed behind my eyelids. That pale flickering glow stretched along the walls, twisting into forms I couldn't quite recognize. I saw the thin, elongated figure crouching there, just at the edge of my vision. My coworkers said I looked exhausted, pale, but I couldn't explain the terror that had rooted itself inside me. Every shadow in the office seemed to flicker and stretch unnaturally. When I glanced at it, my hands shook when I typed, and the hum of the fluorescent lights sounded like whispers I wasn't supposed to hear. By the time I got home, I was trembling. I kept the lights on the moment I stepped inside, every lamp blazing, every bulb at full brightness. But even then, the glow didn't care about illumination. It had grown stronger, more assertive. I could see it crawling across the floorboards, snaking up the walls, flowing across the ceiling like liquid fire. It was waiting for me to notice, to acknowledge it. I tried to avoid the corners, but they seemed to bend toward me, stretching unnaturally. My apartment no longer felt like a safe place. It was a stage, and I was the unwilling audience. Then I noticed the message. This time it wasn't scratched into the walls or appearing in dust. It had formed in the grime along the windowsill, glowing faintly as though it had been etched with light itself. Light me. I froze, staring at it. My fingers hovered above it, unwilling to touch. The letters pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat, and the air around me thickened, making it hard to breathe. Something was trying to communicate, and I wasn't sure if it was a warning or an invitation. My apartment had become a vessel, and the glow was the unknown captain. Desperate to understand, I experimented. I left every light off for hours, waiting for the glow to reveal itself again. At first, nothing happened. The apartment was pitch black, suffocating in its silence. Then, slowly, a faint warmth spread behind my eyes. The corners of the room brightened, soft and eerie. I squinted, and my heart froze. Behind me, reflected in the black screen of my phone, was the figure. Thin, pale, faceless or rather, with hollow sockets glowing white, like holes into another dimension. Its fingers stretched impossibly long, reaching toward me. I spun around, heart hammering, but the room was empty. The lights I had left off made everything look normal, yet the reflection in my phone persisted. The figure was closer now, almost touching the glass. I dropped the phone, and it floated for a second before landing at an unnatural angle, screen glowing faintly with the same hollow white light. I backed into a corner, convinced I was going insane. Night after night, the figure grew bolder. The glow crept along the walls in patterns that made no sense, lines that bent against physics, forming strange, jagged symbols that seemed to pulse when I stared too long. The apartment smelled faintly of ozone, metallic and sharp, as if the air itself had become electric. Shadows stretched and moved in ways that defied logic, and I began to hear faint tapping at the edges of my hearing, soft enough that I thought it was the building settling. But the tapping persisted, rhythmic, deliberate, echoing like a heartbeat that didn't belong to me. Then came the mirror. One morning I went to wash my face and froze. Written across the foggy surface, letters formed slowly as if drawn by invisible fingers. Follow. My hands shook and I splashed water across the mirror, hoping it would disappear. But the words reformed almost immediately, glowing faintly in the reflected light. I staggered back, and that's when I noticed the reflection of the figure behind me. Not a shadow, not a trick of the light, but a pale, elongated being, leaning forward, stretching impossibly, its hollow eyes locked on me. I wanted to run, but every step I took, the figure matched. Every blink, every movement, it mirrored me perfectly. And I realized with a cold certainty that it wasn't T just outside MIT was attached to me somehow. Following me waiting, the glow wasn't content with the walls anymore. It wanted me. The last thing I saw before collapsing onto the floor was a new message carved into the kitchen wall, faintly glowing as if alive. Don't turn. Sleep had become impossible. Even when my eyes finally closed, the glow didn't stop. It crept into my mind as if I carried it with me, a shadow that couldn't be escaped. Every corner of my apartment seemed to bend and stretch under its influence. Walls elongating when I wasn't looking, floors sagging, ceilings dipping. I started keeping every light on, but no matter how bright the bulbs burned, the glow didn't vanish. It wasn't bound by illumination. It woved around it, flowed through it, twisting my environment into something alien and alive. I began recording it, hoping to catch proof, something tangible I could show someone, anyone. But when I watched the footage, the apartment was always empty. No glow, no figure, nothing unusual, just the ordinary room I knew so well. Yet, when I looked up, the glow was there, crawling along the walls, hovering at the edges of my vision. It was like it existed only to torment me, refusing to be captured, always just beyond the lens of reality. Messages continued appearing, each one more deliberate than the last. On the mirror in the bathroom, in the condensation of my shower, words slowly traced themselves like invisible hands at work. Follow. In the streaks of sunlight falling across my floor, in the shadows beneath my furniture, the letters formed again, as if the apartment itself had learned to communicate. I couldn't touch them without my fingers burning slightly, a faint static sensation that made me flinch. They weren't just warnings, they were invitations, commands, promises. I started noticing sounds I couldn't explain. A soft tapping at first, rhythmic and distant, almost imperceptible. Then it became clearer, closer, moving along the walls, across the floorboards, circling me. I held my breath and pressed my back against the wall, listening. The tapping always paused when I moved, then resumed when I froze. It was intelligent, aware, predatory in its precision. One night I woke to a sound behind my bed, soft but deliberate, like fingernails dragging lightly across the floor. My heart thudded, and I forced myself to look. The glow had formed a shape in the darkness, crouched low, stretching impossibly thin, limbs bending in ways that shouldn't be possible. Its face, or what I thought should have been a face, was blank, yet somehow I felt it watching me. I couldn't scream, my mouth felt frozen, my body paralyzed with the knowledge that the figure could move faster than I could perceive. It raised a hand, long and jagged, brushing against the floor, and I felt a coldness leap through the room, as if it had touched the air itself. I stumbled to the kitchen, desperate for light, for some sense of normality, but the glow was already there, crawling along the walls, dripping across the ceiling in a thick, liquid pattern. It formed symbols, twisting and looping like a language I didn't recognize. I tried to memorize them, but as soon as I blinked, they shifted, rearranging themselves into new, more disturbing shapes. The air smelled metallic, charged with energy, and every breath I took felt like inhaling ice. I started avoiding mirrors, phones, cameras, anything reflective. The figure had begun appearing in them, always closer than before, always watching, always mimicking me. Sometimes I'd catch it in a reflection behind me, and even when I spun around, it would already be gone, leaving the reflection staring back as if it had never moved. It was learning me, studying me, practicing its movements in the spaces between my blinks. One morning, I woke to a new message, faintly glowing on the floor in dust that hadn't been there before. Join me. My hand shook violently as I traced the letters, feeling a subtle pull, as if the glow itself wanted me to complete something. The apartment was no longer mine. Every wall, every shadow, every flicker of light belonged to it. Even the air felt owned, pressing down on me, whispering in a language I couldn't understand but somehow feared instinctively. I could feel it in my sleep, wrapping around me like liquid, burrowing into the spaces between my skin and my bones. I tried to run, to leave the apartment entirely, but when I stepped outside, the world itself seemed altered. Shadows clung too long, sunlight bent unnaturally, and distant lights pulsed with the same rhythm as the glow. It wasn't confined to my apartment anymore, it was everywhere, flowing along the edges of perception, waiting, and then, as if to punctuate its control, I saw it in the distance, moving among the shadows on the street. Impossibly thin, impossibly fast. My chest tightened with a new, undeniable certainty. It wasn't just following me, it had begun learning how to exist in the world beyond the apartment. And as I ran, I realized the worst truth I could hide. I could flee, but I couldn't escape what had already touched me. The last thing I saw before collapsing against a building in exhaustion was a new line of faintly glowing text, hovering midair where no physical letters could exist. Soon, by the time I reached my apartment that evening, I already knew there would be no sanctuary. Every step toward the door was heavy, weighted with anticipation, and the chill in the air felt unnatural, like the world itself had grown colder in my absence. I pushed the door open, half expecting the glow to meet me immediately, and it did. It wasn't in the corners this time, it was everywhere. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, all pulsed faintly with the same eerie, pale light. I flicked the main switch, desperate for the normality of illumination, but the bulbs didn't respond. The glow ignored them entirely, flowing around the light as if it were invisible, bending and twisting with impossible freedom. I tried calling a friend, anyone who could help me, but my phone betrayed me. As soon as I unlocked it, the screen blackened, then lit again, showing the same hollow figure I had seen in reflections before. It leaned forward as if through the glass, fingers stretching impossibly long, pointing directly at me. I dropped it, heart pounding, and the phone landed in the center of the living room, screen facing upward, glowing faintly like a warning. The figure didn't move, it didn't need to. Its presence was inescapable, saturating the air like a scent you couldn't ignore. The apartment seemed alive now, aware. Shadows stretched toward me in impossible directions, corners bending, doors warping, furniture subtly shifting when I wasn't looking. The glow no longer clung to edges or darkened spaces, it flowed like water, pooling at my feet, crawling up my legs, brushing against my arms like an invisible hand. I screamed, but no sound came out. My voice had betrayed me long before. I tried leaving again, stepping into the hallway to escape, but the glow followed. It seeped under doors, through cracks in the walls, along the stairwell, a persistent river of pale light. Every step I took, it mirrored. Every breath I drew, it pressed closer, testing, learning, waiting. I realized, with a cold certainty, that it was tethered to me, bound to my presence, like a parasite thriving in the shadows of my life. I retreated into my bedroom, slamming the door behind me, and tried to barricade it. The glow still seeped in, moving through the cracks around the frame, forming shapes that shouldn't exist. Symbols appeared across the walls, etched in light, pulsating faintly as though breathing. My heart raced as I read the newest message, glowing faintly, "Stop running." The words weren't just commands, they were promises, threats, and truths all at once. Then I saw it, or at least its silhouette, crouching in the corner of my room. It had grown taller, thinner, more fluid. Its face remained featureless, yet I felt its awareness, its intelligence, as if it had been observing me for years. It mirrored my movements now perfectly, anticipating them, always one step ahead. I wanted to touch it, destroy it, make it vanish, but it didn't exist in the normal world. Every attempt to interact only made it stronger, more defined. The air changed, thickened, and smelled metallic, sharp, like ozone after a storm. I realized I hadn't breathed normally in hours, as if the glow was siphoning something vital from me. It pulsed with my heartbeat, moving faster when my fear peaked, slower when I tried to calm myself. It wasn't just a presence anymore. It was a predator, adapting, evolving, feeding on me. I tried to sleep, curling under blankets, desperate for oblivion, but the glow seeped into my mind. Even with my eyes closed, it was there, slithering across my vision in the blackness behind my eyelids. I could feel it brush against the inside of my skull, crawling over thoughts, whispering impossibly, silently, its intentions unknown but malevolent. In the early hours of the morning, exhausted and trembling, I noticed something impossible. The glow had begun shaping itself into more than a figure. It was forming other shapes in the room, objects made of light, thin and delicate, like furniture built from nothing but luminescence. They hovered just above the floor, casting shadows that didn't belong, and in the center of the room a new message pulsed, brighter than anything before. Join me. I stumbled back, feeling my pulse spike, realizing that this wasn't a threat I could run from. It wanted me, and I was helpless against it. As the first light of dawn crept through my window, I noticed that even the sun outside seemed dimmer, weaker. It didn't chase away the glow. It only illuminated it, made it more visible. The realization struck me with sudden, crushing clarity. This presence wasn't confined to my apartment anymore. It was learning to exist outside, in the real world, and it had chosen me as its vessel. I didn't know if I would survive its attention, or if I even wanted to. And in that moment, as I huddled against the far wall, too afraid to breathe, I saw the last thing that made my blood run cold: a hand, long and thin, stretching impossibly from the glow, pointing directly at me, and a whispered certainty in my mind. Impossible yet undeniable. Soon, you will be mine. I knew I had to leave, but leaving didn't help. The glow followed me beyond my apartment, beyond the street flicker of normal life. It moved like liquid, threading through the air, crawling along the edges of every shadow. It wasn't bound by walls anymore. It was everywhere, saturating the spaces I moved through. Even outside, even under sunlight, the world itself seemed altered, dimmer, flattened, as if reality had bent to its will. I was not walking through streets anymore. I was walking through its presence. Desperate, I ran. I ran past neighbors, past cars, past the normal rhythm of the world. Everyone seemed blind to it, blind to me. Only I could see it, moving in waves along the buildings, crawling up lampposts, wrapping around the distant trees like it had grown roots in the earth itself. My chest burned, my lungs screamed. But no matter how far I ran, the glow followed, stretching impossibly long, twisting and flowing in ways I couldn't comprehend. I stopped at the edge of a park, hoping that open space would give me some distance, some relief. But the glow condensed there as well, forming a shape, taller than anything human, thinner than anything natural. It crouched like a predator, its head tilting as it observed me. I realized with sudden, paralyzing terror that it didn't just follow. MIT had chosen me. I was no longer alone in my body. I carried it, and it had begun to grow with me, learning the contours of my mind, my reflexes, my fear. I tried to destroy it. I struck at it with a stick, anything in my hands, and felt nothing. My hands passed through the glow as if it were a shadow given form. I screamed, but my voice was swallowed, replaced by a low, vibrating hum that seemed to echo from inside my own skull. It was everywhere. It was me. And I realized then that I wasn't merely being hunted. It had already attached itself. It was no longer a visitor. It was a parasite, a mirror of my body and my life, sharing my senses, learning my patterns, feeding on my fear. In the park, I noticed the first traces of its real intention. Shadows on the ground stretched toward it, twisting unnaturally, forming words in thin, glowing lines forever. My pulse thundered in my ears. I wanted to look away, to run further, but the words, like chains, kept my gaze fixed. I realized then that the glow was not just a presence. It was a dimension of itself, a world it was creating, and I had been invited, or condemned, to join it. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, I couldn't tell. Time had become meaningless in its presence. Every movement I made, it mirrored perfectly, anticipating me, reacting faster than I could react myself. The air smelled of ozone and burned metal, thick and suffocating. Even my thoughts were no longer private. I could feel the glow crawling along the edges of my mind, nudging memories, twisting them, feeding from the panic I could no longer hide. Then, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I saw the most impossible thing. Every source of light around me, street lamps, car headlights, even distant windows, was dimming, as though the glow was absorbing them, consuming them. And in that dimness, it finally revealed itself completely. Its body was no longer just a figure of light. It was fluid, translucent, shifting in form, reflecting every movement I made. I realized, with a horror that froze my blood, that I had become part of it. My reflection in a nearby puddle didn't match my movements perfectly. My shadow didn't stretch as it should. Something of me was gone, absorbed into the glow, leaving only a hollow imitation behind. I ran blindly, but it didn't matter. The glow followed, wrapping around my chest, slipping into my skin, infiltrating my vision. My heartbeat synced with its pulsing rhythm. And then, in the final moment before I collapsed to the ground, I understood. The glow hadn't chosen me by accident. It had waited, studied, hunted, and now it had me. The world outside was irrelevant. My apartment, my street, my life, they were nothing. I was its. As I lay there, unable to move, unable to breathe normally, I saw it extend its long, thin fingers toward me, and I felt it brush against the edges of my consciousness, claiming me entirely. Then the final words formed in my mind, impossibly, glowing like letters burned into my skull. Now you belong to the light. And even as the sun rose, the world continued dimming, fading under its presence. I realized that I wasn't just trapped. I had become a part of it, an extension of the glow, yet aware, conscious, terrified. The light wasn't finished, it had only begun. And somewhere, in the corners of the city, I felt other lights flicker, small, distant, alive, waiting for the next